I'm assuming you're out there somewhere. Okay, I'm good to go. Well, boy, we have a lot to cover tonight. I realized after I was talking about my son's case that I failed to actually go over the letters that I sent to the Greene County courtroom, the court itself. I'm going to go over those, but tonight, since I've been discussing property since a week ago Monday, I'm going to go over property itself tonight. So once I get done with Alex's letters here, I'm going to go ahead and get into property because there's so much, I think there's a lot of confusion about property. See, I see property as something a little bit different than most people. I like to think of property as intellectual property, physical property, and genetic property. And that's the way I see it. And so we're going to go over property because everything is about whose property is it and who can prove it. So, and it doesn't matter what that is. The moment an owner is known, the moment an actual or original owner is known, end of story, end of case, end of problem. And that's what this is all about. Terminating the secondary position that somebody may claim to have on your property. Again, the moment the true owner is known, it's over. So let's get through Alex's letters here because I think it's important that everybody know what I wrote to the court. What I went over last night is what I wrote to, I thought, the powers that be over the court, or the ones that had enough influence to change or to stop the court proceeding. Ultimately, it did work because, see, if I would have wrote just to the court, nothing would have changed. But I didn't. I wrote additional copies that I sent to the court. I sent also to the Attorney General and the diocese, or the Chancellor of the diocese, the Roman Catholic diocese. So at T-Cloud are 3 letters that say Alex GC1, Alex GC2, and Alex GC3. That's Greene County 1, Greene County 2, and Greene County 3. And the first letter is Greene County 1. That's the first letter I wrote to the court. The letter I wrote to the court. So this is what I wrote to the court. Dear Ms. Miller, based upon my own recollection, it seems that either a flagrant violation has been made on the part of a Greene County Sheriff deputy, or there was some real confusion in Greene County regarding my private property. On or near May 21st, 2015, a Greene County Sheriff or deputy stopped, detained, and issued an insane citation. It says, see all included relative copies, upon Kallenbach, Kiefer Alexander J. This is all caps. Without my express permission or consent to do so. For the record, Ms. Miller, I do not offer, sacrifice, volunteer, or entrust any of my private property to anyone. Then I put in the Black's Law definition of recollection. It says, recollection, the act of recalling something to mind. In evidence, a person may use almost anything to refresh his recollection of an event in order to testify, and the evidence then is his testimony, not the document, which has refreshed his recollection. Does that sound like anything like a birth certificate? A memorandum, which I went over last week, a memorandum or record concerning a matter about which a witness once had knowledge but now has insufficient recollection to enable him to testify fully and accurately shown to have been made or adopted by the witness when the matter was fresh in his memory, and to reflect that knowledge correctly, is not excluded by the hearsay rule. If admitted, the memorandum or record may be read into evidence, but may not itself be received as an exhibit unless offered by an adverse party. Then I wrote, as the true holder in due course, with physical possession of a complete legal title evidencing absolute dominion over the private property in question, and I said, see Certificate of Live Birth, I am appalled that any person who has actually, in good faith, taken an oath of office to protect such private property would ever, with such negligence or reckless disregard for the, would ever act with such negligence or reckless disregard for the law of the land. What is the law of the land? Obviously, the Constitution. To wit, Title 18 U.S. Code, Section 4, misprision of felony. Whoever, having knowledge of the actual commission of a felony cognizable by a court of the United States, conceals and does not as soon as possible make known the same to some judge or other person in civil or military authority under the United States, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 3 years or both. All officers of the Uniformed Services of the United States have a duty to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, as set forth in the United States Uniformed Services Oath of Office, which each officer takes upon commissioning. And this is the actual oath. I, A.B., do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter, so help me God. And then what I did is I added, it says, and for those participants within the de facto government. Instructions for the Government of Armies of the United States in the Field, prepared by Francis Lieber, originally issued as General Orders 100, 1863, Government Printing Office, Section 2. This is out of the Lieber Code. As you can see, what I'm doing is I'm building my case by just evidencing my position. My position as the father and property owner. Section 2, public and private property of the enemy, protections of persons and especially of women, of religion and arts and sciences, punishment of crimes against the inhabitants of hostile countries. This is Section 2. Article 31, a victorious army appropriates all public money, seizes all public movable property until further direction by its government, and sequesters for its own benefit or of that of its government all the revenues of real property belonging to the hostile government or nation. The title to such real property remains in abeyance during military occupation and until the conquest is made complete. The title, conquest, this is out of Blacks again. In feudal law, acquisition by purchase, any method of acquiring the ownership of an estate other than by descent. Also an estate acquired otherwise than by inheritance. In international law, the acquisition of the sovereignty of a country by force of arms, exercised by an independent power which reduces the vanquished to the submission of its empire. To conquer a territory or nation by means of force, that's conquest. Article 34 of the Lieber Code. As a general rule, the property belonging to churches, to hospitals, or other establishments of an exclusively charitable character, to establishments of education, or foundations for the promotion of knowledge, whether public schools, universities, academies of learning, or observatories, museums of the fine arts, or of a scientific character, such property is not to be considered public property in the sense of paragraph 31, but it may be taxed or used when the public service may require it. Notice as you go along here that they're speaking specifically about public property. Public property. Article 38, this is where it goes very specific to private property. Private property, unless forfeited by crimes or by offenses of the owner. Notice that it says crimes or offenses of the owner. They're not saying just by crimes. They're saying some other way that an owner could offend, do something. Can be seized only by way of military necessity for the support or other benefit of the Army or of the United States. In other words, the support of the United States or the benefit of the United States. It says, if the owner has not fled, the commanding officer will cause receipts to be given, which may serve the spoliated owner to obtain indemnity. While as a father making a legitimate and written claim upon his property, that proves that I have not fled. I have not fled. I'm standing my ground, both the title and my genetic ground. From my private position based upon my own personal knowledge, the officer who acted so egregiously upon my private property is most certainly guilty of trespass, and if such act be deemed to have been committed upon the commercial seas, he will be found guilty of piracy. In truth, I would have no problem pursuing those persons with whom said officer conspired regarding this particular private matter, for as a righteous man of substantial means and experience, I truly grow weary of all the rogue law enforcement officers across the country acting so willy-nilly upon a man's private property without legitimacy of claim or cause in pursuit of personal gain or profit. I think that my words are fairly obvious. I have intent to make a claim upon my stuff. Black's Law, 5th edition. This is trespass. Okay. I'm not going to read all of trespass, but I am going to read some of trespass. Trespass. An unlawful interference with one's person, property, or rights. Isn't that funny? When we first get involved in this so-called movement, when we first start to wake up, and most of the time, it's about the republic and that it's missing and it's all de facto and all that stuff. And the first few legal terms we learn right away are I do not understand, and then people start making up goofy words like overstand, which make absolutely no sense. But we start running from words that we really don't grasp the meaning of, and so understand is one of those. But the one that right off the bat here, the word person. How many folks out there are that are running away from this concept of person? And look what Black's Law says about a trespass. An unlawful interference with one's person. Well, that implies that you have to have one. And there is a possibility of a trespass upon it. So I have no problem claiming my person. Interference with one's person, property, or right. At common law, trespass was a form of action brought to recover damages for any injury to one's person or property or relationship with another. Trespass comprehends any malfeasance, transgression, or offense which damages another person's health, reputation, or property. Let me jump on reputation here for a second. If baby Curtis is the baby, the spirit-filled being, I mean, this unbelievable gift from God, baby, and legitimate, by the way, I may add. And I think of any, here's the thing, is I think of any baby born as legitimate. That's because there has to be a biological father. And so as far as I'm concerned, every child, every living being born is legitimate. I mean, the fact that maybe a father hasn't given a name or made a claim upon the child doesn't make the child illegitimate, because it's a legitimate being. But basically the way the rule of law is that if the father does not offer his name or does not lay claim to the child, that child is not considered legitimate. So what's funny is that the birth certificate is actually what's called an information. Mother signs it as informant. An information is an accusation. So basically, I always picture mom, after baby is in the arms of dad, mom and dad are cooing over their new offspring. There's this puddle of muck on the floor, this afterbirth material that is formless, shapeless. It's just a puddle of muck. And I picture mom standing over this puddle of muck, pointing a finger at it, an accusatory finger. That's what I picture when I picture the afterbirth on the floor. A mom standing over the top, pointing a finger at this afterbirth, accusing it of something. And that's what's funny. So she signs this document that basically is a document of an accusatory document. And it is identifying a bastard. It's identifying an illegitimate child. And remember that it's identifying the mother's side of the equation only. In other words, it's a fatherless puddle of muck, and it is illegitimate, which is why she's accusing it. She doesn't know this is going on, but this is the legal side of it. And so when the concept of that birth record for that particular character is already libeled. It's already been libeled. And so the reputation of baby, the firstborn, Curtis, indirectly is libeled. If I take on that name of that bastard child, then my reputation is tainted. My reputation as baby is tainted. Anyway, so what I'm getting at is it says, which damages another person's health, reputation, or property. Doing an unlawful act or of lawful act in unlawful manner to injury of another's person or property. An unlawful act committed with violence, actual or implied, causing injury to the person, property, or relative rights of another. It comprehends not only forcible wrongs, but also acts, the consequences of which make them tortious. A continuing trespass. One which is in its nature a permanent invasion of the rights of another, as where a person built on his own land so that a part of the building overhangs his neighbor's land, or dumps rubbish on the land of another. Look at that. Dumps rubbish on the land of another. You know what? We've been talking about Haslam versus Lockwood, where the horse poops out in the public street. In other words, the poop is the rubbish. The poop is the waste. So when the horse poops on the street, the public lands, that is no different than dumping rubbish on the land of another. You can see, when you have eyes to see, it all starts to fit together. So a continuing trespass. If the afterbirth is rubbish or waste material, and it's left behind on the floor of the hospital, which is in the county, which is in Illinois, is it a continuing trespass on mother for leaving behind her material there? Is that a trespass? It could be. It could be looked at as a trespass by mom because she didn't clean up her mess, and so she left rubbish in a public place or in a private place called hospital or in the county or in Illinois. So it's a continuing trespass. Now, what happens if you lay claim to it and pull it away from it and it's no longer there? Now, is it a continuing trespass? Obviously not. But let me read this again. So a continuing trespass, one in which is in its nature a permanent invasion of the rights of another. By the way, how about this? How about this thought? If the public is everybody's place, if the public is everybody's place to share, and the private is yours alone, but you leave private property, waste material, in the public, are you trespassing on the rights of everybody else by leaving this waste material in the public? Are you? Just a thought. I'm just asking questions here, but I think the answer should be fairly clear. As to where a person builds on his own land so that a part of the building overhangs his neighbor's land. Think about that. It's easier to even think of a tree. If there's a fence between me and my neighbor's yard, my yard butts up against the neighbor, but I put a fence up. It shows the dividing, the actual line, the lot line. And I plant a tree, and the tree grows up right alongside my fence. But it also grows up on the other side of the fence into my neighbor's airspace. Is part of that tree my neighbor's at this point? Can he make a claim upon it? Am I trespassing or encroaching upon his land by allowing my tree to overhang into his yard, into his airspace? You better believe it. You better believe it. In such a case, there is a continuing wrong so long as the offending object remains. Remains. The object remains. What do they call a dead body? The remains. Does the afterbirth material have any spirit in it? No. So it's no different than remember that the afterbirth is born alive, but it's born dying because it has no means to self-support. So the afterbirth is born a decedent. It's born a decedent. Baby's not. Baby's alive and kicking. I'm 56 years old. I'm evidence of a living baby. How can I be a decedent? By the way, the word decedent doesn't mean dead. It means dying. So the afterbirth is born dying. It's already dying because it can't support itself. It has no lungs. It has no brain. It has no means of self-sufficiency. It's dying the moment it arrives. Although, because of the legal definition born alive, it is considered a legal person. So now you got this legal person that's born dying, which means it's a legal person that is already considered a decedent. It has nothing to do with you. We are not decedents, like many people out there think. There's talking specifically about the material that has no means of self-support. The afterbirth material is born alive, but it's born dying. It is already the remains. It doesn't have the spirit in it. A trespass may be committed on the continued presence on the land of a structure, chattel, or other thing which the actor or his predecessor in legal interest has placed on the land. A, with the consent of the person then in possession of the land. If the actor fails to remove it after the consent has been effectively terminated, that's called trespass. Or B, pursuant to a privilege conferred on the actor, irrespective of the possessor's consent, if the actor fails to remove it after the privilege has been terminated by the accomplishment of its purpose or otherwise. So again, the owner of the property, i.e. hospital maybe, or the county, may have said, yeah, it's okay to give birth here. So they're consenting to the thing at the moment, but after the fact, with this waste material laying there, they're not consenting to that. So now somebody has to come and clean up that mess, like the health department, the county health department, some reclamation, somebody that comes in and reclaims it. You can see how by leaving something behind of your own, or mom leaving something behind of her own, it's a trespass, especially if it's waste material. Criminal trespass is entering and or remaining upon or in any land, structure, vehicle, aircraft, or watercraft by one who knows he is not authorized or privileged to do so. And A, he enters or remains therein in defiance of an order not to enter or to leave such premises or property personally communicated to him by the owner thereof or other authorized person. B, such premises or property are posted in a manner reasonably likely to come to trespass the attention of intruders or are fenced or otherwise enclosed. Let me say something about the driver's license at this point. The driver's license is permission to do something otherwise unlawful. That's all I'm going to say about it right now. License to be on the premises, because you're no longer authorized to be there. You don't have a right to be there. A joint trespass exists where two or more persons unite in committing it, or where some actually commit the tort, the others command, encourage, or direct it. Let me ask you something. If I'm sitting in my chair right now, which I am, and a piece of me is still trespassing on some piece of property somewhere, am I liable? Am I still guilty of trespass because I'm relative or related to the other article? You better believe it. It's a joint trespass at that point. If I leave a piece of me behind, the chorion, on somebody's property, I'm still trespassing. Permanent trespass, one which consists of a series of acts done on successive days which are of the same nature and are renewed or continued from day to day, so that the aggregate they make up one indivisible wrong. Trespass ab initio, one who innocently or with a privilege enters upon the land may become a trespasser from the beginning if his subsequent conduct constitutes trespass by an abuse of such privilege. Trespass dibene asportatis, trespass for goods carried away, the technical name of that species of action of trespass for injuries to personal property which lies where the injury consists in carrying away the goods or property. In other words, I have it on my person. I have something of somebody else's with me. I'm carrying it with me. That doesn't belong to me. It's evidence of trespass. Okay, you can see it. Trespass to land. I'm gonna do a little bit of this, and I'm gonna keep going on the letter. Trespass to land. At common law, every unauthorized and breach of the boundaries of another's land was an actionable trespass. By the way, go to Blacks, look up the word illegal. There's a lot of people out there screaming about the legal name is illegal. Don't use it. The word illegal means unauthorized. So again, if you're using a name that you're not authorized to use, it is considered a trespass. But when you are authorized to use that name, it's not a trespass, and it's not illegal. Liability for intentional intrusions on land. One is subject to liability to another for trespass, irrespective of whether he thereby causes harm to any legally protected interest of the other. If he intentionally, A, enters land in the possession of another, or causes a thing or third person to do so, or remains on the land, or fails to remove from the land a thing which he is under a duty to remove. Who is responsible for your DNA? Who is responsible for you, your physical body? A trespasser, one who has committed trespass, one who intentionally and without consent or privilege enters another's property. A person who enters on the property of another without any right, lawful authority, or an express or implied invitation or license. lawful authority or express or implied invitation or license. Isn't that funny? They have invitation or license. If I'm invited someplace, I can't get in trouble. If I'm licensed to be there, it means that I'm not supposed to be there, but by license I have a grant to be there. I prefer to be invited places. I prefer not to need a license for anything. Joint trespassers, 2 or more, unite in committing a trespass. That's me and my Corion. And I use the word piracy because of the commercial aspect of the deputy sheriff's action. It's all commerce. We all know that. So it's a potential act of piracy. And what did I write about that? This is Blacks again. Those acts of robbery and depredation upon the high seas which, if committed on land, would have amounted to a felony. Brigandage committed on the sea or from the sea. Wherever on the high seas commits the crime of piracy as defined by the law of nations and is afterwards brought into or found in the United States shall be imprisoned for life. The term is also applied to the illicit reprinting or reproduction of a copyrighted book or print or to unlawful plagiarism from it. I'm going to get into that tonight because a friend of mine sent me something from another gentleman that's out there swinging away, and basically he's talking about the Copyright Act of 1790. Copyright Act of 1790, I'll get into it after I get done with Alex's stuff here, but the Copyright Act of 1790 applies to the title. But the title is only given rise by the substance. Without the substance, the title does not exist. So again, even though there are people thinking that they're dealing with the root cause, they are not. The title is not the root. The substance is the root. Without substance, there is no title. Without a physical author, there is not an idea. There's not a writing. So again, the title is secondary. It's subsequent to the substance. Without the substance, there is no title. But again, it says here, piracy. The term also applies to the illicit reprinting or reproduction of a copyrighted book or print or to the unlawful plagiarism from it. You do realize that your name is the title to the book of your life. The only one that has a right to the story of your life is you. Sadly, if somebody has the title to that book in their possession, they basically can tell you to jump and how high. So, that's, by the way, that's probably a great segue for what I have later on is the concept of piracy. Look what piracy says again. I'm gonna go over this. It says, imprisoned for life. If you are found to be committing an act of piracy within the United States, imprisoned for life. Not necessarily physically imprisoned. Remember, you can be imprisoned without being physically imprisoned, which is all the American people, by the way. They have absolutely committed piracy when it comes to the title. And there's only a couple things you have to do to not be found guilty of piracy. Okay, my words. With so much past confusion and the likelihood of future misappropriation or misapplication of my private property, mischief or misrepresentation via libelous, denominational information or mistaken statute, convention, or similar identity, or misprision or professional misconduct from bar attorneys who clearly have no subscribed oath to lawfully practice upon any soil beyond the District of Columbia, I now expect you to expunge and seal this erroneous act forever and immediately notify all persons of interest that the particular matter known as Kiefer Alexander James Kallenbach, all caps, is of a private nature and is to be forever allowed safe, peaceable, private, present moment, unrestricted, burden-free travel. People, I wrote this 2 years ago. Black's Law, expunge, to destroy, blot out, obliterate, erase, efface. By the way, did they not do this? Were the results not and expungement. Did they not take it off the record? They did exactly as I told them. To expunge, to destroy, blot out, obliterate, erase, efface, strike out wholly. The act of physically destroying information, including criminal records in files, computers, or other depositories. Expungement of record, process by which the record of criminal conviction is destroyed or sealed after expiration of time. In closing, Ms. Miller, should you or any other person decide to dispute, disagree, or contest any of my aforementioned statements or claims, I will accept written rebuttal evidence within 10 business days receipt of this registered letter. Failure to respond within the time allowed will be considered a tacit agreement by both you and the Greene County Circuit Court to all aforementioned statements via acquiescence. Finally, I do not tolerate trespass upon my private property, and I do not in any way offer my precious private time to such erroneous claims, actions, or cases. I now formally declare this business closed. That was letter number 1. It's always about property. Whose is it and who can prove it? Letter number 2. It has been more than 10 business days since you, as Greene County Circuit Clerk, received registered letter blah, 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 explaining my private and lawful solo position regarding the matter in question. I have yet to receive any rebuttal evidence to the contrary, thus must presume you and Greene County agree to said registered letter in its entirety. I must now remind you that an unrebutted trespass upon my clearly private property may very well lead to tort damages. Trespass. It comprehends not only forcible wrongs, but also acts the consequences of which make them tortious. A tort, a civil wrong which can be redressed by awarding damages. There's my only threat, by the way. That's my threat right there. Torts are civil wrongs recognized by law as grounds for a lawsuit. By the way, grounds are required. In other words, it can't be a tort without the grounds, but the grounds is substance. Grounds is the gist of the matter. Grounds is your physical existence. Without such grounds, you cannot act. There cannot be a tort. Without such grounds, without you, the living, there is no tort action. Okay, so that's all about torts. Tort law is state law created through judges or common law and by legislature statutory law. Many judges and states utilize the restatement of torts as an influential guide. Okay, so restatement. General principle. One who invades the right of privacy of another is subject to liability for the resulting harm to the interest of the other. The right of privacy. Listen to this, people. The right of privacy is invaded by unreasonable intrusion upon the seclusion of another, appropriation of the other's name or likeness as stated. Appropriation of the other's name. C, unreasonable publicity given to the other's private life. D, publicity that unreasonably places the other in a false light before the public. Places the other in a false light. You know, the light of day, it's called sunlight. The light of day is called sunlight. By the way, the birth certificated person is a lunatic because it only exists by the light of the moon. Nighttime. It's called the shadow government for a reason. Nighttime. The birth certificated person is a lunatic or lunacy because it's considered lit by the light of the moon. A false light. The sun, the light of the day, is life-giving. The false light is the light of the moon. It's where the shadow government rules, by the way. Intrusion upon seclusion. One who intentionally intrudes, physically or otherwise, upon the solitude or seclusion of another or his private affairs or concerns, is subject to liability to the other for invasion of his privacy if the intrusion would be highly offensive to a reasonable person. In other words, you have to be reasonable. Do you realize that when I went over the definition of belief last night, belief is unreasonable. So if you're living by belief, you are not considered reasonable. Appropriation of name or likeness. How many people are talking about this? Hey, you got to run away from the name. No, you don't. In fact, that's the dumbest thing you can do. What you need to do is make a proper claim upon it. It says one who appropriates to his own use or benefit the name or likeness of another is subject to liability to the other for invasion of his privacy. Publicity given to private life. One who gives publicity to a matter concerning the private life of another is subject to liability to the other for invasion of his privacy if the matter publicized is a kind that, A, would be highly offensive to a reasonable person. Hey, if somebody said you were dead, if somebody actually probated your entire existence, your life, your estate, because somebody said you were dead, remember again, Lazarus, the idea of dead is unclean. Unclean is unsanitary, which is insane. I mean, if somebody called you insane, would you not think that maybe, especially in the public, maybe that you have an action, a potential action against that person? It's called libel, by the way. B, is not of legitimate concern to the public. In other words, if it's not public property, if it's not in the public, it needs to be a legitimate concern of the public, which is what, by the way, when the afterbirth is left behind and picked up through eminent domain, the afterbirth material is placed into the public. So now it is a legitimate concern of the public until you pull it out of there. Anybody that understands Hale versus Henkel understands that you're trespassing on public property when you're dealing with the afterbirth person, the afterbirth character. Until you pull it back into the private, you are trespassing, and you are using somebody else's name. It's you. You are the criminal, which is why the red lights flash behind your car when you get pulled over. It's because you are a felon. Every American is already considered a felon, 100%. Publicity, placing person in false light. One who gives publicity to a matter concerning another that places the other before the public in a false light is subject to liability to the other for invasion of his privacy if the false light in which the other was placed would be highly offensive to a reasonable person. I'm not dead. You're saying I am. The actor had knowledge of or acted in reckless disregard as to the falsity of the publicized matter and the false light in which the other would be placed. In other words, somebody knew that what they were doing was wrong. You have to have knowledge. In other words, knowledge is intent. Finally, Ms. Miller, as you already understand based upon my previous letter, I do not offer, sacrifice, volunteer, or entrust any of my private property to anyone. It is never for publication or public consumption. Thus, any attempt to change or convert my private property is a criminal act. Because of the fact that a deadly weapon was used in the vexatious taking of my private property or other serious offenses, other more serious offenses are being considered. Govern yourselves accordingly. And I put in the definition of larceny and conversion. Larceny is the felonious stealing, taking, and carrying, leading, riding, or driving away another's personal property with the intent to convert it or to deprive owner thereof. The unlawful taking and carrying away of property of another with intent to appropriate it to the use inconsistent with the latter's right, the owner. The essential elements of larceny are an actual or constructive taking away of the goods or property of another without the consent and against the will of the owner and with a felonious intent. Obtaining possession of property by fraud, trick, or device. By the way, everybody should know that the driver's license is considered a device. So if they are taking your property, if you're giving your property away through that device, that is larceny. If you can prove it, it's larceny. Preconceived design or intent to appropriate, convert, or steal is larceny. Conversion, an unauthorized assumption and exercise of the right of ownership over goods or personal chattels belonging to another, to the alteration of their condition or the exclusion of the owner's rights. Any unauthorized act which deprives an owner of his property permanently or for an indefinite time. Unauthorized and wrongful exercise of dominion and control over another's personal property to the exclusion or inconsistent with the rights of the owner. What do you think so far? And finally, the third letter. By the way, remember, I never got a response. The response came about, 6 weeks, 8 weeks after the case was already closed. That's when they sealed it all up. I never got a single response from anybody. This is the third and final letter that went to the county. Dear Ms. Miller, there is a law maxim, desperata non depend jungi, which means dissimilar things ought not to be joined. And yet, it seems that the folks in Greene County may attempt to join or commingle my private living property to some other person's decedent property. I do not ever accept erroneous invitations to public forums to discuss licentious claims when, as a matter of fact and with first-hand knowledge, I know by experience that all rights pertaining to said matters are already possessed by me alone. Again, I do not tolerate or voluntarily suffer trespass upon my private property, and I do not in any way offer my precious private time to such claims, causes, or cases. To be very clear, Ms. Miller, all of my private land, sperm, DNA, as well as appurtenances to such land is under my private care and control, until I say they are not. That includes, but is not limited to, my son, Kiefer, and his appurtenant property. And for future reference, my private property is not now or ever been subject to the separation of church and state, for only public land and property is subject to such separation. By the way, I'm going to cover that after this. Only public land and property is subject to such separation. Do not ever confuse me with all the other mindless or uncaring fathers out there who unknowingly or through legal construct abandon their private property or family to this insane Western world. I am not one of them. Finally, I expect my included notarized affidavit to be taken seriously regarding all matters at hand. The property which Greene County has negligently confused is now and has always been part or parcel to my private land and estate. Just as stated in 2 previously received and unanswered registered letters, respectively, you, Ms. Miller, as Greene County Circuit Clerk, or any other person choose to dispute, disagree, or contest any of my aforementioned statements or claims, I will accept written rebuttal evidence within 10 business days receipt of this registered letter. Failure to respond within the time allotted will be considered a tacit agreement by both you and Greene County Circuit Clerk to all aforementioned statements via acquiescence. I myself find this matter closed. Govern yourselves accordingly. Continued on back. I did a 1746 declaration. I declare under penalty of perjury under the laws of the United States of America that the foregoing is true and correct, executed on 6/24/15. That's it. That's what I wrote to the Greene County Court. Now I want to say something about this stuff. I've never seen anybody else write this kind of stuff, claiming their position as a father, ever. And I got the results that I expected. because I made a legitimate claim upon my property and nobody could dispute it. The key word here, and I use it now quite often, and I used it in my my final recording at the county. And I want to, before I get into it, I want to actually identify the concept of property, because my whole position and all the other stuff that's going out there, going on out, whether it's Restore the Republic or all the birth certificated nonsense, all this stuff, I'm not interested in it. I was, the UCC and all that junk, accepted for value and all that junk, 14th Amendment and all that junk. I'm not interested. I'm interested in one thing: my life and everything that goes along with it. That's it. That's all I'm interested in. And my life consists of my property and title to it. That's it. Nothing more. I am not asking for anything more. And so I'll get into some of this stuff, because remember, back to the idea of Haslam versus Lockwood, which is the case that I had all you folks read for this week. What is that case about? What is Haslam versus Lockwood about? It's about, well, what did they make it about? Well, Haslam had a position and Lockwood had a position, but neither one of those positions would have existed had the owner of the material laid claim to it. The original owner is the only one that had any true rights to it. Only when that material was abandoned did Haslam versus Lockwood come into existence. Without the abandonment, there is no Haslam versus Lockwood. That's my whole point. Everything I do for the next 4 weeks is going to be driving this point home as to all any of us have to do is make a proper claim and tie ourselves to it. Stand our ground. And we will be protected by the United States of America when we do that. There won't be any separation of church and state, which is basically what they needed to have done so they could create another position, a secondary position of your property. And that's called diversity of citizenship. There's a piece of you out there. That's why the 14th Amendment, when you understand the property aspect of this, the 14th Amendment becomes very clear. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. Yay! And of the state wherein they reside. If those two things are separate, if I'm not in Illinois and I'm in the District of Columbia, which was created as a state in 1864, right in the middle of all that civil, i.e. Roman, war. So what do we have here? If I'm of the soil of Illinois, if I can prove that I was born on the soil of Illinois, that is a union state, one of the 50 in the United States of America, the republic, the country. So the 14th Amendment is not damaging if the United States that you're dealing with is the United States that has Illinois in it. So now all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Now all of a sudden if the state wherein I reside is Illinois, now the United States is very clear. It's the United States of America. The fifth that has a flag with 50 stars on it. How many stars are on the United States of America flag? 50. And the only way you get to fly that flag is if you were born to the soil of one of those 50 states. Illinois. But I have to prove it. I have to have some evidence in my possession. I have to be able to prove that I was born in Illinois. You know what's crazy about this is that the District of Columbia has been considered a state since 1864. But there's still only 50 stars on the flag of the United States of America, the Republic, not 51. The District of Columbia is not part of the United States of America. The District of Columbia has its own flag. Hell, it has its own constitution. It even has its own name. It's called the State of New Columbia. The District of Columbia has nothing to do with the 50 states of the United States of America. There's only 50 stars on the United States of America flag. Haslam versus Lockwood is not relevant when you make a proper claim as the true owner of the birth material that had been abandoned. Once it's no longer considered abandoned, everything I just read about my son's case is true for you. It's true for you in your own body. I can make all the same claims to me, not just my son. I can condemn every single courtroom based upon these letters for my son, and so can you. As long as you understand what you're talking about. My citizenship is only predicated, it's totally 100% predicated upon the place where I arrived, and I need evidence of that, and that is the birth record. But if I'm not tied to that birth record, I don't have evidence of my arrival. And I am missing presumed dead. So I'm going to go to Black's Law, and I'm going to look up the word property. I'm not going to go over it because it's a giant word. But the first word I'm going to go over tonight is property. Page 1095. Property, that which is peculiar or proper to any person. Peculiar or proper to any person. That which belongs exclusively to one. Listen. I don't know how long ago it was that I brought up the concept of trust and the fact that a trust does not exist when there's a single owner. When there's only one owner who has 100% shares in the property. In other words, there is no such thing as a share when you own 100%. It's just called private property. It's just your property. And there's no equitable position when there's no external shares. It's not called equity when there's a sole owner. So property, it says that which is peculiar or proper to any person. That which belongs exclusively to one. One means one. One doesn't mean two. My property implies my property. Otherwise, it would be our property. It also says that if there's only one exclusive owner, there is no trust. Because a trust requires more than one. In the strict legal sense, an aggregate of rights which are guaranteed and protected by the government. The United States of America will protect your stuff if you have a legitimate and proper claim upon it. See, the reason it feels so horrible out there right now is because we don't have a proper claim. Well, I do, but we collectively do not. So when the cops are out there beating people up, tasing them, bringing them in, it's because there's no evidence that you have a right to the property you think you have. In fact, you're on the wrong side. You're considered an outlaw. The moment you get yourself together and pull yourself together into one position, The cops are actually protecting private property. They're always protecting private property. You just don't have any right now. You don't have any legitimate claim upon it. They will protect it when you do that. So it says, are guaranteed and protected by the government. See, everything that the perception of most people right now is that everything is corrupt. It's not corrupt. Your perspective is wrong. It's not corrupt. It might be deceptive, but it's not corrupt. We need to stop thinking along the lines of corruption. It really just is our problem to fix. The term is said to extend to every species of valuable right and interest, more specifically, ownership. The unrestricted and exclusive right to a thing. To a thing. Remember, names are for things. Do I have a name? No. But does my body have a name? Yes. My body is a thing. The right to dispose of a thing in every legal way. To possess it, to use it, and to exclude everyone else from interfering with it. That domination, or that dominion, or indefinite right of use or disposition which one may lawfully exercise over particular things or subjects. Things or subjects. My body is a thing. The character or person is a subject. And you see that subject as a title. So when the court is talking about subject matter, you're talking about a title and substance. The title and the land. The land is your body. The title is the name to the land. So the courts are dealing with subject matter jurisdiction. Why do they need you in the courtroom? Because right now they have possession of a title. But it's a defective claim because the substance, the very substance itself is defective. The afterbirth is defective. So they have a title to defective lands. And it's only one side. It only has one side of the equation, the mother side. When you walk into the courtroom, you perfect their claim. You volunteer to show up, and then you perfect their claim. Now they have a perfect claim. You need to take their ability to even call you into that courtroom. You don't need to go through all that black magic. And the only way to do that is to do it the right way, the way I've done it, that I know of. The exclusive right of possessing, enjoying, and disposing of a thing, the highest right a man can have to anything, being used to refer to that right which one has to lands or tenements, goods or chattels, which no way depends on another man's courtesy. Don't you want to be there? By the way, that's where the people of the Republic are. They have ownership of their lives, of the stories of their lives. That's in the Republic. Not in the welfare state. The word also commonly used to denote everything which is the subject of ownership, corporeal or incorporeal, tangible or intangible, visible or invisible. I'm talking like spirit stuff here now too. The spirit, mind, body, spirit. Real or personal, everything that has an exchangeable value or which goes to make up wealth or estate. It says wealth or estate. It extends to every species of valuable right and interest and includes real and personal property, easements, franchises, and incorporeal hereditaments, and includes every invasion of one's property rights by actionable wrong. Property embraces everything which is or may be the subject of ownership, whether the legal ownership or whether beneficial or private ownership. Term includes not only ownership and possession, but also the right to use and enjoyment for lawful purposes. Property within constitutional protection denotes group of rights inhering in citizens' relation to physical thing. Isn't it funny how they use the word citizen at this point when they're referring to the constitutional aspect? Why? Because if I can't prove that I was born within the boundaries of Illinois, my Article 4 citizenship is in question. If my situs, if my situation, if it's my location, my genetic location, or something is located outside of the Republic, like in the District of Columbia, I have no constitutional protections. See, when people start to ask the right questions, how come the constitutional protections don't apply to me and my property? It's because I'm not within the place where constitutional protections exist. The District of Columbia has no constitutional protections as we know them. They have their own constitution. It says inhering in citizens' relation to physical things as right to possess, use, and dispose of. And then here's the one that I found the most amazing is goodwill. Goodwill is property. Goodwill is property. That sounds kind of like, when you say goodwill, it sounds like full faith and credit to me. So my full faith and credit is property. And if I put my full faith and credit in a government, that's where a trust actually does come about, because it's property. And if I let the government, known as the United States of America, hold my full faith and credit in their trust, that's the security. That's the indemnity. I put my faith in this government, they protect my stuff from everybody. But I have to be there in order for it to actually be true. I have to be alive. I have to have evidence of life, and I have to have evidence of my birth upon the soil of Illinois. And unless I'm connected to that piece of paper, which is the only memory, it's a memorial to that occurrence, to that happening. If I can't tie myself to that happening, I'm not here. I'm not here. Goodwill is property. Okay, there's another word that I wanted to go over, and it's product. Product. Product is on page 1088. Boy, I'm gonna need a beer after this call. Thank God I own some. Thank God I have spirit in my body, and I can actually direct my physical thing here that has a title called Curtis Richard Kallenbach. I can actually tell it with my mind. I can actually get this thing that's filled with spirit. I can get it up off this chair and get this instrument of God over to the refrigerator, and it will reach in and grab a beer for me. And then I get to experience the beer through the instrument itself. Because the instrument itself has all kinds of incredible senses. It actually has taste buds on its tongue. And when it pours the beer on its tongue, I get to experience it. I get to experience it when the body experiences it. Product. With reference to property, term refers to proceeds, yield, income, receipts, and return. Goods produced or manufactured either by natural means by hand or with tools, machinery, chemicals, or the like. Product means something produced by physical labor or intellectual effort, or something produced naturally or as a result of natural process as by generation or growth. Production, page 1089. Process or act of producing, that which is produced or made, i.e. goods, fruit of labor, as the productions of the earth, comprehending all vegetables and fruits. The productions of intellect or genius as poems and prose compositions, and the production of art. Didn't I talk about the Roman Catholic concept of art? A child is considered Christian art. Aren't fictitious characters art? Aren't they the conceptual creations of the mind? As manufacturers of every kind. Remember the German definition of kind or kind is child. What I'm getting at is that product. They use the word labor quite often, which is where obviously mother delivers a product called baby, also another product that's born alive called afterbirth. And of course in the afterbirth there are two separate and distinct products, which is the chorion, which matches baby's DNA. It's called fetal tissue, or the chorion. And then, of course, there's maternal afterbirth, which is pure mom. So the afterbirth material itself has two owners. It has two owners. Baby owns the chorion, and mom owns the maternal. The birth record, Minnesota Rule 220, talked about ownership of that event, or of the product of that event, or the names on the title. You know what? Let's take a break here for a second and go to P-Cloud. And I want everybody that has access to it, pull up my little ship, picture of a ship, and it's called The Journey. Click on that and look at that little hand drawing. I call it The Journey. Why? Because from the moment of your arrival, the birth moment itself, think of it as your port of entry. What's my port of entry? Where did I arrive? I arrived at the port of entry known as Illinois, or Winnebago County, or Swedish American Hospital. My port of entry. The journey, to me, is all points in between the alpha moment, my arrival, or my creation, and the omega, which is the end or the termination of the journey, which is when my little spirit leaves the heart, the SA node. When that spark goes away, the journey's over. What is required for the journey? I drew it right here. I drew it as a triangle. Earlier last week we saw it in mind, body, spirit. Well, I drew it here so you could see it. You could physically get an idea of what is required for your journey, your life, the story of your life from point A to point Z, from the alpha moment to the omega moment. Remember that I am the Christ, the concept of Christ is the present moment. The word present and grace are the same. So to be in the grace of God, the grace of God is to be animated by life itself, the life force, the spark in the heart, the thing that actually is you, inside you. It actually lives inside the heart. So what are we looking at here? Well, I drew my little stick figure. That's the captain. That's the mind. That's the one that gives direction to the ship, to the vessel itself. I also call it capital. The word cap. Where does the cap go? Where does the hat go? What is capital punishment? What is to be decapitated? It's to lose your head. It's to lose your mind. So the captain is the mind. It's the leader of the ship, as in leadership. The hull of the ship is the body, and if you look up the word hull, it will say body. So the ship itself is your body. And I always say that the ship represents the physical, or the ability for labor, physical labor. Sometimes I use the word mind for the capital, and sometimes I'll use the word muscle, mind and muscle. Because your physical body is the actual instrument. Nothing can get done without the body. I cannot experience the beer without the body, without the instrument itself. It's funny because when you sign your name with the hand itself, in the medieval days they would call the one that actually does all the business of the king, they would call him the hand of the king, because the king would instruct the hand. It's an office, it's an official capacity. He would instruct the hand to get these things done in his kingdom, in his realm. He would tell the hand, this is what I want done, and the hand would go get it done. Just like the king, i.e. your mind, the lord over your land, the landlord, the mind itself instructs the body. When the mind makes a decision and it instructs the body to sign for it, and the hand signs off on it, it's the hand of the king, and the king is the mind. So looking at this little picture here, you got the mind as the one that gives direction to the body, the vessel itself, the ship, the captain giving direction to the ship. What's the sail represent? The sail is the capturing of the wind. The wind is the breath of life. The wind is the spirit. Without the wind is the only, it's the life force itself. Without the wind, without the breath within you, the vessel does not move. The wind is the energy source to the vessel. And just like in life, just like in your physical body, inspiration, to inspire, is to take in the breath and evidence the life. It evidences God within. The breath itself, inspiring, to take the breath in is life. To expire, to breathe out, is death. Until you breathe in again, you are dead. Your last breath is not followed by inspiration. And that's the moment you expire. Expiration is the breath out. Inspiration is the breath in. When you quit inspiring, you are dead. It is your last breath, and it is a breath of expiration. You have expired. Without the wind or the spirit of life inside that SA node, without that heart pumping, without the life, the Spirit of God in you, your body does not move. And if your body doesn't have life, if it doesn't have God in it, there's no reason to even worry about the captain. But I'll tell you what, you need all three of these, mind, body, and spirit, to be whole. To be whole. Any one of those things missing, and you have been injured, you are not whole. Last night I brought up Corinthians, I think, where Christ actually says that when you're whole, you don't need to be healed. In other words, when Jesus gets back, he's going to kick your ass, meaning that when when everything's present in one place at the same moment, you are the Spirit-filled man, and no Spirit-filled man is to be judged by another man. And that's right out of the Pope Boniface's mouth in 1302. We need to see this as all three elements together, mind, body, and spirit in the same moment in time and space. Why is it important? Why is it important to be able to have the title? If you look at my vessel there's the name of it's on the back. Realistically, it should probably say, Curtis Richard Kallenbach, because all vessels are female. All ships are female. And then, of course, in the Summa Theologica, St. Thomas Aquinas says that the substance that's produced from the womb is from mother. So father gives form, which is the title, and mother gives substance. You got to look at this stuff. You need the masculine and the feminine. You need the father and the mother. The father's heavenly father, and then there's Mother Earth, substance plus title. That's possession. That's ownership. So what is another word that's important to learn that is actually in my final recording? The word is res nullius. Res nullius. That's page, first let's just go to res, which is page 1172. 1172. And there it is. Res. A lot of people hear the word res, but they don't really know what it means. Res, the subject matter of a trust or will. Let's think about this one sentence right here. The subject matter of a trust or will. How many wills do you have? The ship captain is the will. The will gives direction to the vessel. The wind gives life to the vessel. The will is the mind of the man. The will is the thing that says, we're going here. I'm taking you here. But it says the subject matter of a trust or will. A trust implies more than one owner. So res, it says, is the subject matter of a trust or will. If your property is in a trust, there's a secondary administrator over your life. If you're not the sole owner, somebody else has a say in what the hell you do. This is not sovereignty talk, by the way. This is property talk. The only sovereign position I have is I'm the Lord, I'm the landlord over my body. My kingdom extends from the tip of my toes to the top of my head. That's it. I have a lost sheep out there that's called the Corion, which I'm also claiming. I'm bringing it back into the fold by my claim, because that is part of my DNA, and I'm not letting it get away. Because if it's out there somewhere else, somebody might have a claim on it. Which is why it says subject matter of a trust or will. Will is singular. Trust is more than one. In the civil law, a thing, an object. As a term of the law, this word has a very wide and extensive signification, including not only things which are objects of property, but also such as are not capable of individual ownership. Not capable of individual ownership. What is that? Is my Illinois citizenship mine? Is my Article 4 citizenship within the Republic my private property? Or is that place called the United States of America a shared place? I cannot lay claim to that property. I cannot lay claim to the citizenship because A, I didn't create it. But B, in order for me to lay claim to that position, which is more than one owner, more than likely I'm going to have to put up something or stake it, which is not hypothecation, by the way. If I want to be part of the society that's described in the Declaration of Independence, they make it clear that it says, and to these ends, what? Our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. You better have something at stake if you want to participate. But it says, not capable of individual ownership. I cannot own the United States of America. I can lay claim to a piece of it through my citizenship, but I can't own it. And in Old English law, it is said that to have a general import comprehending both corporeal and incorporeal things of whatever kind, nature, or species. By res, according to the modern civilians, it meant everything that may form an object of right in opposition to persona, which is regarded as a subject of rights. So that you got the object of rights and the subject of rights. The object of rights, in my case, is my physical body. The subject of rights is the title to that body, which is also literary property, which actually is copyrighted at some level. Res, therefore, in its general meaning, comprises actions of all kinds, while in its restricted sense it comprehends every object of right except action. This has reference to the fundamental division of the institutes that all law relates either to persons, to things, or to actions. Res, the subject matter of a trust or will. If you go, by the way, I would read all of res if I were you, if you haven't done so already, because you got something like res, let's see, res derelicta, abandoned property, property thrown away or forsaken by the owner so as to become open to the acquisition of the first taker or occupant. Again, subject matter of a trust or will. Subject matter. So imagine when you're talking about subject matter of a trust or will, res derelicta, abandoned property. In other words, abandoned subject matter. Abandoned subject matter that I've been talking about is the matter itself. What is the matter? It is the actual DNA, the substance of your existence. What is the subject? It's the title to that matter. If you abandon that, you have abandoned subject matter that will definitely pull you into a court case. On the next page, page 1174 is the one that I wanted to bring up, which is res nullius. Res nullius, the property of nobody. A thing which has no owner. Nobody. Just like in The Exorcist, when the demon screams out, I am no one. A thing which has no owner, either because a former owner has finally abandoned it, or because it has never been appropriated by any person, or because in the Roman law it is not susceptible to private ownership. Again, private ownership. If a public park is a really good example. A public park is for everybody's use. I cannot own a public park. That's what they're talking about when they're talking about property that cannot be used or cannot be claimed by an individual. What if the individual is the afterbirth? Because Curtis Richard Kallenbach, the legal definition for legal name actually identifies Curtis Richard Kallenbach as a individual. What's funny about that is if I don't claim it, if I don't claim it, it gets picked up through eminent domain and goes into the public. Now is it possible for me to claim that public property if it's already been claimed by the public? If I cannot get it out of the public, if I cannot get it, if I cannot recover that property, Article 38 of the Lieber Code kicks in, and it says private property. assuming I have not fled, I will be indemnified for that property, which is exactly what that's what happens, people. They cannot give that afterbirth back to me, but they can indemnify me for everything that goes through that afterbirth's name. And that's what they do when you have a legitimate, registered connection to it. You have to be connected to it legally and lawfully. Because when you're connected to that title lawfully, you are connected to the United States of America government, the Republic. Again, res nullius, the property of nobody, a thing which has no owner, either because the former owner has finally abandoned it, or because it has never been appropriated by any person. Remember the etymology for nobody? This is also a P cloud, but it's nobody. Mid-14th century, no person, noon, meaning no person. No person of importance. So, importance, the quality of having consequence, or important. You have not imported it. You have not brought it to you. It's still exported. It's still foreign. You need to import it so it's not in a foreign situs trust. If you don't import it, if it's not important, you are nobody. You have no body. I see dead people. How about appropriated? Has never been appropriated by any person. What does the word appropriate mean? Appropriate. Appropriate. To make a thing one's own. It says never been appropriated by a person. To make a thing one's own. What is the thing in my case? It's the ship. It's the body. The thing also has a name, which is known as a title. Remember that without the thing, there is no title. The thing gives rise to the title. So those people that think it's only about the title, they are missing the boat. Literally missing the boat. The boat is the ship is the body. It says to make a thing one's own, to make a thing the subject of property, to exercise dominion over an object to the extent and for the purpose of making it subserve one's own proper use or pleasure. Subserve. Understand. Underwrite. Subscribe. Subserve. Do you have any substance under your words? Is there any substance to your existence? Making it subserve one's own proper use or pleasure, to prescribe a particular use for particular monies, to designate or destine a fund or property for a distinct use or for the payment of a particular demand. Have you noticed how often they use the word particular? To refresh your minds. What is particular? Particular. Page 1008. Particular, relating to a part or portion of anything. Boy, does that sound like the Corian? Relating to a part or portion of anything, separate, sole, single, individual. By the way, remember, Curtis Richard Kallenbach is the legal name of an individual. The individual is the afterbirth, people. Specific, local, comprising a part only, partial in extent, not universal, opposed to general. back to appropriate. To prescribe a particular use for particular monies, to designate or destine a fund or property for a distinct use or for the payment of a particular demand. Also used in the sense to distribute. In this sense, it may denote the act of an executor or administrator who distributes the estate of his decedent among the legatees, heirs, or others entitled in pursuance of his duties and according to their respective rights. Decedent. Remember, you are not the decedent. We are never the decedent. The afterbirth is born dying. It is a decedent. So all these people that think that they think we're dead. No, they don't. No, they don't. They're not stupid. The courts are not stupid. And they're not corrupt. They're actually doing exactly as we're telling them to do. We just don't know what we're saying. Appropriated surplus. In accounting, a portion surplus set aside for specific purpose other than for existing liability. Appropriation. The act of appropriating or setting apart. Prescribing the destination of a thing. Prescribing the destination of a thing. Appropriation of land. The act of selecting, devoting, or setting apart land for a particular use or purpose as to where land is appropriated for public buildings, military reservations, or other public uses. Public, military, public. The taking of private property for public use in the exercise of the power of eminent domain. This is appropriation. In this sense, it may refer merely, the word mere, it means mother. M-E-R-E is mother. It may refer merely to physical occupation and contemplate payment prior thereto, in contradistinction to taking, referring to a legal taking and presupposing payment after damages are due. But look what it says, the taking of private property for public use in the exercise of the power of eminent domain. Understand this, that it is the people of the United States of America that bring it value. And what about the people gives it value? It's the abilities, it's the capital and labor of the people that bring value to the country. It's called industrial property, and I'm going to be covering it in 2 weeks. It's the industrial property that actually drives the economy. The funny thing is that a piece of your industrial property known as your DNA, a piece of it was left behind, in my case, on the soil of Illinois. And it became the very thing that secures my citizenship, Illinois citizenship, Article 4. That's where my citizenship arises. That's what has been on deposit. That's my stake, as in the Declaration of Independence. Our lives, our fortunes, our sacred honor. It's also the thing that indemnifies everything that I do in the United States of America. If I'm not tied back to that thing, I am considered an outlaw. I am a stranger to everything going on there, and I'm not indemnified. So when I get brought into their courts, they don't know who I am, and I'm going to have to pay that piper. Again, when that music starts, I better start dancing. Appropriate. Is there anything else here? Public law. The act by which the legislative department of government designates a particular fund or sets apart a specified portion of the public revenue or of the money in the public treasury to be applied to some general object of governmental expenditure or to some individual purchase or expense. These words by now should start popping out at you, like individual purchase or expense. It says, applied to some general object of governmental expenditure or to some individual purchase or expense. In other words, when you pull yourself together, the individual is now with you as opposed to outside of you in a foreign situs trust. And that individual is the indemnity. Without that individual, you have no thing. You are no thing. You are nothing. You have nobody and you are nobody. And you are nowhere. Let me touch on it. I got about 20 minutes left. I want to go over something, and I can go in depth over it, but I think if I just touch on it tonight, it'll start to make more sense. I drew it up right before I got on the call. I want you to understand that the Homestead Act of 1862, remember, there's so many things that occurred between 1860 and 1870. That's where a lot of the groundwork occurred, because remember, the Civil War, civil is Roman. So that Civil War was about the splitting here, or bringing Rome here. The Homestead Act of 1862. What is the Homestead Act? It's sort of like that 40 acres and a mule. In other words, the Homestead Act was to give people a portion of public lands. They gave public lands to people, and as long as they went and worked those public lands, they were able to keep them. The interesting thing about the public lands, or the Homestead Act, though, is the guy that was the first one ever to get any property. And by the way, I'm going to say this before I even get too deep into this, is I think that most court cases, if not all, I think any kind of case law itself, I think every court case is artificial. I think they create court cases, they write them up, they're pure fiction, and they're created in advance of what they're going to do legislatively. So they have a court case that backs up the legislative process. The Homestead Act. I mean, what happened was the first man that ever received his 40 acres and a mule, so to speak, in 1862, his name, believe it or not, was Daniel Freeman. I kid you not, Daniel Freeman. And he received his partial. What's funny is Daniel Freeman also brought the first separation of church and state case in Nebraska, and it basically set the stage of the separation of church and state. Let me say this. The separation of church and state only exists on public lands. In other words, the church and state absolutely positively have to stay separate, but only on public lands. Private lands, you can do whatever the hell you want, but on public lands, there is an absolute separation of church and state. The reason this is important to know is because the afterbirth material, when it gets picked up through eminent domain, goes into the public. So now a piece of you is considered public land. And that piece has to have a separation of church and state. Now, if you remember the letter I sent, I said under no circumstances is my private property to be considered separate, a church and state separation, which is what? The church is ultimately one thing, and the state is the mind. You got the body and the mind now separated. And see, the problem is that on the afterbirth material, which is considered public land, that now is granted back to you by birth certificate. Now you have a public land grant called birth certificate that's generated by the abandoned afterbirth material. But that public land grant, or public land, the public land is actually a birth. Think about it, it's a space, a birth, inside some government land. I mean, if I went into your yard and I just stepped off, a 10 by 10 plot, that space, that plot, is also a birth. If I dug a hole in that 10 by 10, it'd be a birth. It's a space. The birth certificate is no different than that plot. It's a space. It's a piece of public land. It's a deed to public land. And that public land does not allow church and state to be there. The reason it's important is because you can't survive. You cannot live with the separation of church and state within you. Remember, the Jesuit Ignatius Loyola's only job was to separate the soul from the man. And they did it on paper with the birth certificate. That's the separation of church and state, the mind and the body. It can't happen in reality. But they did it on paper with the birth certificate. And what they did is they deeded back the abandoned land, which was picked up through eminent domain. They deeded your own stuff back to you. And now you are absolutely separated via church and state, because now you're living through the public land. That's why it's important to pull this stuff back into the private. When it's in the private, every piece of you is in one place at one moment. You are not considered missing, defective, dead, any of that stuff. But if you're living through the public land grant called birth certificate, that's a separation of church and state, and you are absolutely considered dead. Not you, but the character you're living through. So the Homestead Act is important because what it did is it created the land grant, the public land grant, and it also created, in 1902, through the separation of church and state case, it created that no church and state can exist on public land simultaneously. And it's important because that's what the Jesuits' whole idea was, to separate the soul of man from man and to get the deed to that land, which is your body. So let's think about this for a second. I've never talked about this, at least in this class, but I'm gonna say this. The Father represents the state, and the Father's name is the title. The Mother represents the church, and the Mother brings substance. So you have the Father's name, the title, and you have the Mother's product, the substance. And the substance and the title must be bound together for a property claim. A sole property claim. No trust. If those two positions are separated, you have a trust. If you have the title and the land in one place, there is no trust. And that's what I'm getting at here. What we're about to do, what I've already done, is to pull all this together so there is no trust and your life is in your own hands. Or I should say the hands of God. And the only one that can tie those two positions together is I am. In fact, right now there's a chasm, there's a space, there's a wound where they call it a divorce. I talked about it last night. A man and wife has been divorced. The wife is what? The bride or the church. So when you're separated within yourself, it's kind of like Humpty Dumpty. Remember, Thomas Jefferson, they were talking about a wall of separation. A wall of separation. It's that wall that divides the father from the mother, the title from the land, the church from the state. That wall of separation must come down. And the only thing that can bring that wall of separation down is I am, which a lot of people might call the Christ. So the Father, Son, Holy Ghost is the title, the land, and the Spirit, all together. The Spirit is I am. Remember, I am implies the present moment, the presence of mind, the body here, now. I am represents to be. If you, it's so funny to say this, to be implies all three, mind, body, and spirit. Not to be means that you're someplace else. Some element of you is missing. To be is to be. You either are or you are not. Bill Clinton says it depends on what the definition of is. Is to be. Because is not to be. So a friend of mine, Carl, sent me a recording today of a gentleman named Ken Dost. Now, I don't get along with Ken for lots of reasons, which is okay. In fact, I get along with Ken. He doesn't like what I talk about. But I don't mind. Like I said, I'm not going to stop anybody from putting anything in one of the folders, the student folders. I think that it would be fine for everybody to listen to Ken's position. But I'm going to tell you this right now, that Ken does not understand that substance gives rise to title. The Copyright Act of 1790, by the way, is at the P Cloud. But the Copyright Act of 1790, in fact, I'm going to go ahead and go to it right now, as long as I'm talking about it. And I wouldn't mind if anybody, if you want to take the time to listen to this, go ahead, Carl, and you can upload it, on the P Cloud into that student file. What is it called? Student Dropbox. Go ahead and put that in there. But I think the Copyright Act of 1790, I don't know what the title is. Let me see if I can find it. Usually, there it is, Copyright Act of 1790. I want to go ahead and address this right now. I got about 7 minutes left. Understand what this is about. Remember that the title is the title to the book or story of your life. And when you were born, they took that name and they put it on deposit. Your name is already copyrighted. It's a trade name for you. And it is for your exclusive use, by the way. But you need to register it back to you in order to have the lawful right to use it. But it is the book of your life, from the point you arrive to the point you die. Everything in between is the story of your life, and the only one that has the the authority of that life or of that book is you. But you need to claim it. But here's what it says. I'm going to go. I'm not going to go too far into this. It says this is the Copyright Act of 1790, an act for the encouragement of learning by securing copies of maps, charts, and books to the authors and proprietors of such copies during the times therein mentioned. You are the author. You are the only authority over the story of your life. The only. See, I believe that when they put the birth announcement into the paper, so that through that publication, they created a common law copyright. It's already published. The moment baby Curtis was identified in the newspaper through that announcement, that was publication. And then they sent off the birth record to where? Where is the birth record located? It's in the Library of Congress. The Library of Congress is where the story of Kallenbach, Curtis Richard is located. And just like any other library, the author's name, the authority, If I wanted to go look up what? If I wanted to go look up Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven, the poem, I would look up Poe, Edgar Allan, because he is the author over that poem. If you want to look up the story of my life, you would go to the Library of Congress, where it is on deposit as a security. The last name, Kallenbach, Curtis Richard, is on the shelf at the Library of Congress. That is my position within the Republic. I have all the rights to that story. It also identifies me as an Article 4 citizen within the Republic. If I do not lay claim to that position, I am no one. I'm the only one that has the legal authority and lawful authority to use that name, but it needs to be registered back to me. If I do not have it tied to me or secured to me, I have no evidence of it being my story. By the way, there's another incredible set of one of my favorite finds ever was the legal definition of syndication. It's one of my favorite definitions, by the way. It's too long to go into tonight. But I would advise everybody to look up syndication. Because your name, the title of your life, your name is actually in syndication. That's where all the value is. The value is in the syndicated aspect of your name. Every time you sign your name, money is generated because your name is in syndication through the Copyright Act of 1790. Look up, so Black's Law, page 1300. The word syndicalism, and syndicate, and syndicating. I'll do two of them because it's important to understand that the name itself is in syndication, no different than when Charlie Brown's little comic strip came out every day. The news of the day. Every time you wake up, it's a new day, and the newspaper, the story of your life is out there. And your name is in syndication. And you're out there promoting it all day long. Look at the word syndicating means. Gathering materials suitable for newspaper publication from writers and artists and distributing the same at regular intervals to newspapers throughout the country for publication on the same day. Syndicate, an association of individuals formed for the purpose of conducting and carrying out some particular business transaction, ordinarily of a financial character, in which the members are mutually interested. An organization formed for some temporary purpose, such as the organization of real estate trust and the sale of shares to the public. Syndicates may exist as corporations or partnerships, either general or limited. A group of investment bankers. You want to know what the Federal Reserve Bank is? You want to know who's underwriting everything? It says a group of investment bankers who together underwrite and distribute a new issue of securities or a large block of outstanding issue. By the way, by doing what I did, my issue is no longer outstanding. It says an association of securities broker-dealers, usually in writing, who assist the principal underwriter in the controlled distribution of the securities of an issuer. Your signature is the issue. You are the banker. The value is your story. It's everything you produce. This is some really fun stuff to read, people. Syndicalism, syndicate, syndicating. The Copyright Act is talking about the story of your life and the title to that book. You have all the rights to it. You just need to claim them. You just need to claim them, and that's where we're going with this. So, wow, time for a beer, it looks like. Anyway, 10 o'clock my time. Thank you for hanging in there. Carl, go ahead and put that up in the recording. Put it up there. I would advise everybody to read the Copyright Act and understand what they're talking about here. The book is your book. It's the book of your life, and it has a title, and you see that title as a name. The name is the individual name, which is Curtis Richard Kallenbach. That's the name of the book, and that book is on the Library of Congress, and it's last, comma, first, middle. It's funny because the Library of Congress is actually called the Library of Last Resort, meaning that the last name lives there. The Library of Last Resort. Kallenbach is the last name on the shelf in the Library of Congress. On that note, good night, everybody. See you tomorrow.